Okay, we're here. This is Jay Brown Yoga Talks podcast. My name is Jay Brown. If you're new, welcome. All the rest of y'all, what's up? How are you? I know, it doesn't feel that great right now, does it? I mean, I wanted to come in with a super positive vibe and try to, start this week off with you in a really positive way, and I'm going to do my best, but I'd be lying if I didn't admit that stuff feels pretty rocky underfoot. It just seems like a underlying anxiety, and I don't think it's even just my country. I feel like it's a lot of places in the world, and it's the planet, and so sorry to start off all heavy like that, but things feel pretty serious right now, so I think we should take them as such. That's not going to stop us from having a good time today, though. I mean, we're still here, right? We're still on your way to work or having your breakfast or whatever you're doing, right? We're still going about our days, so we might as well make something of them, I suppose, right? Well, I am glad to be back home. If you were here last week, you know I was in the deserts of New Mexico. And you're going to hear more about that in today's talk with Colleen Boyd from Downtown Desert Yoga, which I recorded while I was there. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in just a bit. But first, I did want to take a moment to reflect with you. I managed to set some new boundaries this week. I took more walks, spent less time on the screens. I wrote a blog, and it's probably already up. You can go read it. It's called, Is My Yoga Authentic? And it was an opportunity for me to try to put some words to some of these difficult questions that I've been grappling with inside myself. And I think I'm not the only one. Questions about how do you honor things that you've learned when you can't support the people that taught them to you? And this question of separating the teacher from the teachings, like what does that even mean? And even more, I was also just thinking about how much what we're doing right now in our classes is defining what yoga is, in the same way that the generations before us were shaping what yoga has become when they mainstreamed it, and it's become what it is through what they were doing in the classes. So what we're doing in classes right now is shaping it, and that is changing. It's changing. What people are doing in yoga classes is definitely changing, which is exactly what I'm talking about today with Colleen, because I was sort of amazed, but also on some level not all that surprised, because I've been talking about it a lot, how I feel like yoga's going more underground, and how in these little pockets, in these far off places where the overhead is still low, that's where the yoga's happening. And Las Cruces was really some proof to that pudding, because Colleen, as you'll hear today, went through a similar evolution to a lot of us. And it's crazy that that's happening all over, and that there is seemingly some common progressions that people have experienced. And it is affirming to hear about that. And you're going to hear about that today from Colleen. I think you will appreciate it as much as I did. Before we get to that, let me mention that I've got some dates coming up for my Gentle is the New Advanced Easing the Pain Tour 2020. And these events have been going wonderfully. I had a great time in Las Cruces. I did the Europe gigs. And if you're listening and you're anywhere near where I'm going to be, come hang out. I'm going to be in Sarasota, Florida, March 21st and 22nd. And then I will be in Austin, Texas, April 11th and 12th. And I have never been to Austin before. I'm really looking forward to that. And I've gotten a bunch of emails from you folks around there. So, hey, listen, it would be great to meet you in person. And you can register for those two events and find out about more and just learn about the tour in general at jbrownyoga.com/tour. Go to jbrownyoga.com/tour. All right. Is there anything else? Yes, actually there is. And, if you were listening last week, I made some comments. And I did get a lot of feedback about that, I got to say. I thought I might get a lot more blowback than I did. I actually got a lot more support than I got any blowback. And I certainly wasn't planning on going there again this week. What I had thought I would do is read an email. You know how I used to do that? I get a lot of emails from you listeners, and I used to read them, and I haven't done that in a while, so I thought I would read an email. So I was looking through some of the emails I have in this file, and I ended up finding this one, which I'm going to read because it spoke to my recent sentiments. It says, "Hello, Jay. I just wanted to share a little story. I had a shitty day yesterday. I work in Beijing and brief clients about political risk, and I had done a briefing that morning for the government relations team of a very big U.S. tech company. I made a joke I'd made dozens of times while talking about tariffs. Donald Trump's not consistent about much, but he's been consistently protectionist since the 1980s. He's consistently protectionist in the same way that he is consistently sexist and racist. When suddenly, one of the men in the audience of about 10 people stopped me. He raised his voice and said, 'I'd like you to remain professional. I think we need to stay away from politics, and I think the words racist and sexist are out of line.' I was so shocked. It threw me off my stride for about 10 minutes, and I found myself stumbling over slides that I had given 100 times before because I was being professional. My job is to talk about politics, including sexism and racism, and of course, tariffs. But something about my comment triggered something in him, and he felt safe to raise his voice and tell me off. It was a surreal and strange experience to be gaslighted and shut down and demeaned in front of an audience. And even though the rest of the briefing went well and the client was happy, I felt a bit wobbly. I also wondered whether he would have felt confident to tell me off if I had not been a woman of color. Anyway, after that fun, I was on my way home, and I turned on your podcast, and suddenly I wasn't in a traffic jam on a highway in Beijing, but at Knoebels among the trees with you and your girls. And I found myself smiling all the way home and imagining them running about, having a lovely time, and thinking that if I ever come to PA, I'll take my 7-year-old daughter too. And your little anecdote, told to cheer yourself up, cheered me up too, all the way over in China. I just wanted to say how much I love your podcast. I've shared them with my yoga community. I hope to write again, but just wanted to say first, what a great job you're doing. Keep on keeping on. Rachel. Well, Rachel, I know that you wrote this some while back, and I don't know if you're still listening to the show, but I loved coming upon this all these months later, and I plan to go back to Knoebels with the girls. And this anecdote that you shared with me just felt like it encompassed so much of what I hope for this show to be. Even the little bit of irreverence in the politics and even the real issues, about the way women are treated. And in any case, thank you. And I hope that you're doing okay. The news from China these days sounds really scary. So I just hope that you're safe, and really appreciated you reaching out. And if any of you ever are inspired to share a little something with me, please feel licensed to do that. Just go to the website, shoot me an email anytime. So appreciate these sentiments of connection, which is very much in the spirit of today's conversation. So why don't we go ahead and get to that, shall we? Let's transport ourselves to the deserts of Las Cruces, New Mexico, and listen to this conversation that I had with Colleen Boyd. Okay. I hit the button, Colleen. It's recording now.
Good morning.
Good morning. I'm really glad that we decided to wait until this morning to do this after everything else was done. And we're sitting in your living room, and there's this. I'm glad I put myself on this side of the couch because I'm looking at this wall of windows and this view of yours, the mountain range. This isn't a prayer. What would you call this?
The valley.
The valley.
With the mountains in the background.
The valley with the mountains in the background.
The Oregon Mountains.
And what's that route right there?
That is I-25. Actually, yes, that's I-25.
I-25. Yeah. And I have to say, I don't know, you might not have listened to it yet, but I recorded the intro for this week's show where I'm staying here with you. And I was saying how much I recommended that it would be a good idea if people got a chance to go to the desert. Mm-hmm. And this morning I was thinking about that. I was like, well, what is it? What is it I'm feeling when I come here to Las Cruces and I'm here in the desert? Because it feels markedly different than where I live and lots of other places I've been. And I think sometimes it is about just like whether it's a desert or it's a beach or it's a forest, you know? Mm-hmm. And here, what I think I'm feeling is just like the population density, like there's so much space per capita.
Right, yes.
It's like 99,000 people or something in Las Cruces. Mm-hmm. And I can feel that. Like, I feel like my mind could spread out.
Yeah, the expanse of it. Yeah, and it's no cliche. There is a reason they call this the land of enchantment.
Is that what they call that?
Yes.
I didn't know that they call it. Specifically New Mexico?
Yes, New Mexico. That is our tagline on our license plate, the land of enchantment.
I see. And you were born here?
I was born here. Yeah, my husband and I were both born here.
I see. And so I want to ask you about, well, I guess before I want to ask you anything, I want to say first that being here with you and coming to Las Cruces and doing a weekend here, it's been very reaffirming because I've had this theory that like the forefront of yoga or the evolution of yoga has been going back underground or something. That it used to be New York and LA where people were having the most innovative conversations in yoga. But now, because of gentrification and all these other things we talk about on the show all the time, right? And you know about, we've been talking about over the last couple of days. Actually, I don't always see that. And then, in fact, it's where people still have low overhead.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yes.
And
it's affordable to live.
Yeah, you can, and so coming here where there's only 99,000 people and meeting with like 12 people, and you guys are like having the conversation, like that's why you probably listen to the show, right?
Right.
And so I'm like, wow, that's true.
Well, it's very reaffirming to have you here.
Yeah?
Yeah, yeah.
It's been great. Well, I guess now I'm curious. Okay, so you're born in Las Cruces, New Mexico. You told me you had a former life as an architect.
Yes. Still an architect, but yeah.
Yeah, but
yes.
you had that was like a
yes,
career path that you were pursuing that
right.
You're not necessarily pursuing now. Right. Is that accurate?
That's right. Well, no, that's not true.
You still do a little bit of it.
I am, yes.
All right. Well, but you also own a yoga center now.
Yes.
And so I heard you talking the other day about yoga in Las Cruces in like the 80s.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I wasn't here in the 80s. I moved away. My husband and I moved away and went to San Francisco for years, and that was late 80s. But yes, there was yoga here in the 80s. I think you heard some women there in the studio talking about metamorphosis.
That's what they're talking. That was the center.
Well, it's a lovely little studio that those of us who had any interest in going to yoga, they did a lot of other things there as well. But yeah, were
there other yoga centers besides that one?
Not that I know of, but that didn't mean that there weren't little pockets. But I think they were it.
And so, how old are you when you first stumbled into a yoga class?
Well, as I said the other day, I wasn't taking classes, but I was doing yoga in the middle of the living room floor with my mom when we were watching public
Lilius, you were a Lilius student, like many people.
Yeah, but, I took a yoga class there at Metamorphosis, but I didn't really get into a regular practice until I lived in San Francisco.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And that was the mid-90s.
Okay, so we were in San Francisco at the same time.
We were.
I was only in San Francisco for 6 months, like in 1994. But you were there.
Yes, you were just down the street.
I was not into yoga at all at that time.
Oh, you weren't?
No. Mm-hmm. I had not ever even practiced. Well, no, that's not true. I had done some yoga classes in college. And I had taken 1 or 2 classes at Jiva, that's right. Mm-hmm. But I didn't have a yoga practice really yet. It wasn't until I got back to New York.
Yeah, I started yoga with a friend of mine. We used to go to the gym together, and that's where we started our yoga. But even then, the gym yoga back then was much more traditional. It wasn't like the...
They didn't have their own, weekend training programs for personal trainers to teach yoga classes, right?
No, those instructors were really more traditionally, for the lack of a better term, more traditionally trained. It wasn't a flow class. It was more hatha-based, right. I guess I would say.
All right, so you took classes in San Francisco, but you were working as an architect at that time?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then what made you come back to Las Cruces?
Well, I'm going to go back to my experience of yoga in San Francisco because right before we moved back to Las Cruces, not right before, but right before I got pregnant, I went to my first hot yoga class.
Ooh.
And so my story is that was my workout, and I was so happy not to have to ever go back to the gym.
I see. So finding hot yoga became instead
that was
going to the gym.
Yeah, that was my workout. So shortly after that, I got pregnant. I practiced for a short time, and then we moved back here when my son was 6 months old. That was in 2002.
I get that. When you have a little one, then
everything changes. Your priorities
shift
change.
Your whole plan, right?
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
So you came back to where you guys grew up.
Yeah.
And you built this amazing freaking house. It's really cool.
It was a good change for us. The first year, as I told you the other day, it was really, really hard. It was culture shock. We were in San Francisco for 13 years and landing here. It was a bit extreme. But
you knew it. You grew up here.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, the quality of life is just so amazing here. Shh, don't tell anybody.
Yes. Exactly. You don't want to
No, it
ruin
really is. But, being a younger person and being used to that pace and all of the things that an urban environment offers you, and then all of a sudden life changes so drastically and you've got a baby in your arms, and I was postpartum, and woo, that was tough. But here was the thing, I was working with people who were my architecture clients then who had moved here from elsewhere, from Hong Kong and from Santa Fe and from back east, and it gave me the opportunity to see Las Cruces through a different set of eyes. It was amazing.
Yeah, see, that's what I was just going to say. From someone who'd not from here and has not spent time in a place like this, as I started, it really does have an enchantment.
And that's the reason they moved here, you know? And so, because when I was younger, I had aspirations and I couldn't get out of here quick enough.
I know. I had that too. You know, the reason I went to the big cities, I wanted to be stimulated. I wanted input. I wanted, you know, and now I'm like, nah, I don't want any more input. I just want space to like spread out, please.
Yeah.
So that's a nice, like, exhale. So it feels like a big, long exhale.
Good analogy. Absolutely.
The desert feels like one big, long exhale.
Yes.
Isn't that cool?
Lots of space.
All right, so you did the baby thing for a while, I'm sure, right?
Yes. Yeah, as a matter of fact, I was given the opportunity by a dear friend of mine who's an architect here in town to work part-time. I mean, my gosh, I couldn't have asked for anything better.
Yeah.
I got to work part-time and spend that other time with my son. That was remarkable.
And were you maintaining a yoga practice at that time?
Yes.
What was your yoga practice after you got back to this Las Cruces?
Right. So when I moved back, shortly after we were here, a friend of mine that my husband and I went to high school with, actually he and Kim were friends. They took art classes together. And she opened a hot yoga studio. And I was like, oh, thank God I can stay in Las Cruces.
So there was hot yoga in Las Cruces.
Yeah, she was way ahead of her time.
Yeah. I just, again, since there's not that much there's not that many people here, I wouldn't have imagined that there would have been much yoga.
And Kim was another one of those people that was born and raised here, moved away, you know, went to New York, went to Arizona, and came back here to raise her family.
Brought that freak yoga stuff back with her, huh?
Yes.
And you were on board doing the hot yoga.
Yeah, I was very grateful because, you know, it was my time away from my son. You know, as I jokingly say, sometimes I would feel guilty, like, sweetie, talking to my husband, sweetie, do you mind if I go to yoga class? And he was like, no, go.
Yes.
Because he knew, like, that was where, you know, I'd recenter.
I know,
some
and there's
time for myself.
There's few moments these days. Sometimes I joke, it's like a haircut. Like once a month, I get like this hour. It's like a haircut. I don't know. I know what you mean. It's a scheduled thing where you get to go do your thing. You know,
and it felt really good. I felt good when I left there.
All right, so you were doing hot yoga, and you were being an architect, and you're raising your son, homeschooling him, which is a lot of work.
Yeah, but I had a lot of help. A lot of help. I didn't take on all that responsibility myself. You know, I sent him out into the community. My mom was with him on a regular basis. I had a fabulous young woman who helped me. My dad gave him drafting lessons. You know, like he was out and about with a lot of other people.
It was a team effort.
It was a big team effort, yeah.
See, that's kind of nice. A village homeschooling education.
It's a village, yes. And I was very fortunate.
Well, he's a
tag teamed with a lot of other moms, you know.
Well, I just met him the other day, and he's super sharp. I mean, seems to me you did an awful good job. Okay, so why or when do you decide, or when do you start teaching yoga? When does that come into play?
Right, so I had been attending Kim's studio, and, you know, after practicing on a regular basis, I was like, well, actually, let me back up. Before I left San Francisco, before I got pregnant, and I was practicing hot yoga, I was thinking, oh, I want to go do this Bikram training.
Oh, you were thinking, huh? That's a missed bullet.
What's the song? God's unanswered prayers. Yeah, thank goodness I didn't do that.
Yeah. So you had it in mind, though.
There's just a little kernel there. I don't know, you know, what brought it up. But anyway, I'd been practicing with Kim for a while, and I just said, hey, one day in passing, I was like, you know, I'm interested in teaching. If you ever are interested, let me know. And one day she called me.
She called you.
Yeah, she called me. She was like, you know what, Colleen, I'm in need right now. And so I started teaching back then what we referred to as a silent class.
So wait, you hadn't done any training. She just had you start teaching.
We bootleg a lot of stuff around here.
No, but I mean, we were talking about that the other day, that is more how it happened. It wasn't always like formal trainings. And if you demonstrated in class that you clearly knew how to do the practice.
Yeah,
and then after class, you can hang around and talk and converse and be like a sociable person. Then, she probably needed some help. You needed you to cover for her, right?
Yeah, it worked out great.
So you just started doing it.
Yep.
And it was a script. Were
Right,
they using the script?
And I had practiced so many times, because I'm not a memorizer. I am not the type of person. I was a terrible test taker. If I ever would have had to have gone to that training and memorized all that shit, there's no way. Yeah, no way. But because I had practiced so frequently, I was like, oh yeah, I know what comes next.
Well, that's the thing, sometimes when I was training people in how to teach some, which I don't think you can really do, but I was trying to be helpful in people in that process. This exercise, I would always tell them, they were always like, well, how do you come up with your cueing? And my suggestion was, well, you do a practice with yourself where instead of doing all the breathing, because I do lots of breathing, you practice with me all weekend, you're going to verbally articulate what you're doing while you're doing it. So inhale, arms out and up, palms together overhead, look at my thumbs. Exhale, forward over my legs, hands, just to come up with your words.
Right.
So if you know the practice, you've done it.
You can just say it as you go.
You could just put the word, you probably know the script. You know the script in your body. Finding the words, probably not too hard. Although you're supposed to use real specific words.
Oh, yeah, they were very specific. But here's the thing. Here's the fabulous thing about the way I describe what Kim did with her, because she was Bikram trained. She did a kinder, gentler version. It was still very traditional, but she didn't say make it hurt. She dropped out. She was like the beginning of this path that we're on.
Oh, because you saw her soften it.
Yeah. Even her tone, like she was very commanding and, delivered it in a way that was familiar to what I was used to in San Francisco.
I'm sure she did a good job at the training and learned how to do it the way she was supposed to.
Absolutely, yeah.
But then being here in Las Cruces and not having Bikram coming around or whatever, she kind of did what she wanted to do, right?
Yeah, and it wasn't too far off, but again, it was just the energy and the tone. It was fabulous.
She brought some kind of softer, not mean.
Yes.
I remember I only went to a couple of Bikram classes, but I remember one that I went to, the teacher said before class something like, you might throw up, and it was like this drill sergeant thing, and I was
right?
like, what?
Yeah.
Yeah, but okay, so that's interesting though, because you got to see someone modeling something, which that was the beginning. They were trained in this thing. But then they were allowing themselves to not be stuck to that, or they were allowing themselves to evolve in some way and to let it change and
to bring their own energy to it.
That's right.
Yeah.
Is she still around?
Yes, she sure is.
That's cool. What's her name again?
Kim.
Shout out to Kim.
Yes.
Early yoga adopter, evolver in Las Cruces.
Yes.
And fortunate for you to have met her. So did you start teaching regular classes at that time? You still being a mom and an architect, right? You doing this once a week kind of thing or whatever?
Yeah, I think I started with 2. And it was one of those things, it was kind of funny too, because up to that point I was only practicing maybe once a week. And she asked me to teach Tuesday, Thursday. And I was like, oh God, how am I going to do that? And you know how it is, it just all works out.
Yeah, and then it's fun. At first, it's fun to do, and you want to do it, and you got a new thing, I bet.
Yeah. And then, like I said, it was a silent class, so I was able to practice at the same time I was leading.
Okay, so tell me what that is. Silent class means it's like on your steps towards being a teacher, you don't even say anything, you just do it in front of everybody?
You don't say as much.
Okay.
Yeah.
But and then mostly it evolved just demonstrate it.
Yeah, exactly.
I have actually... I don't know how much I subscribe to it now, but in the past I used to recommend that. Like having a script, which I think is a good idea, although I want people to come up with their own script. I also think that just doing it with people until you kind of feel like you got your feet underneath you as a teacher for a while is
Absolutely.
a good idea.
To embody it as you're saying
just
it.
lead people through it and do it with them.
Yeah.
And let them come along with you until you really feel like you got yourself solid on the pace and making it work in the time and, feeling comfortable. At some point, I feel it's very natural for you to sort of come away from that. And
That's right, yeah.
But in the beginning, when you're first starting...
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. So that was part of the way she helped mentor you or train you.
Yeah. It just... I can't even remember if those classes were silent class. I don't think they were. I think that was her way of easing me into it.
Saying, you don't have to say much.
just come and lead the class.
Just do it. You know how to do
right?
it. Just do it, right?
Exactly.
I totally see that.
It worked.
And then, of course, once you're there and you're being a teacher, right? Mm-hmm. Right on. Okay, so I'm not sure where we are in time now.
Right.
When was that? When was it, this time that we're talking about where you start subbing for her and you first start doing these silent classes? Your son's born already, so...
I don't know. That was mid-2000s, I guess.
All right, mid-2000s.
Late 2000s.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're already when I had my spot.
Well, no, what am I saying? The first decade. What am I saying?
What,
you know
2007
maybe,
or something?
yeah,
right?
exactly.
Around there. Exactly what I was just thinking, because that is where yoga had already become a very mainstream thing. Mm-hmm. Did you see, was there any kind of yoga boom in Las Cruces? Was there, an increase or... No, because there's only 99,000 people. What's the boom?
We've never really seen, this explosion, but it's always been around.
Yeah.
I mean, there are 3 studios here now.
Okay.
In this size community, that's pretty remarkable. And all of us are doing fine.
Really?
Yeah.
Do you guys know each other?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
See, that's cool.
Yeah.
I tried when I was in Brooklyn. We actually did this thing. We tried to do the Williamsburg Yoga Coalition. Mm-hmm. And we had a meeting of there was maybe there was a bunch of yoga centers in Williamsburg at that time. And it was I don't know, 6 or 7 of us. Mm-hmm. And we had a meeting or two, but it didn't go that great. Mm-hmm. We tried to come up, I think, with promotional things that we could all do together, like a Williamsburg Yoga Day, and we do a passport, and you could go to any center. We were trying to come up with some cool ideas to work together. But, people had different agendas.
Yeah,
I mean, 3 people probably
right,
easy.
3 different personalities.
Once you get more people in that group, if you get lucky and those 3 personalities can, communicate
and we have worked cooperatively. The 3 of us taught a class together at one of the most recent yoga festivals that we've had here in town, which doesn't happen often, but there's no animosity at all. Mm-hmm. But everybody's doing their own thing. We all have different flavor and style, and there are people that cross over. There are instructors that cross over.
Yeah,
not a lot, but
and there's. I guess for me, it was always the same. I always felt like yoga teachers need to get whatever gigs they could get.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And I was always teach wherever you can teach.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it was always there was one center that was real close that always felt a little weird. But in Las Cruces, everything's pretty spread out. You got to drive wherever it is, right? And that's good that you guys can be cool with one another.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when do you start to move away from architecture towards yoga teaching more, or does that ever happen? It seems like that's happened. Am I right in saying that?
Things changed for Kim, and she was ready to let go of this studio. And at that time, a friend of mine who had a son, my son's age, he and I spent a lot of time together, and we were like, oh my God, we got to have a studio. And so, we started practicing in her garage, trying to heat it up, and what are we going to do? Mm-hmm. And so I actually found a space and convinced the building owner to let us try it for a month to see if we could get it heated up. And ultimately, I ended up buying the studio from Kim. And my friend Jane and I, started Downtown Desert Yoga.
I see. And part of the first order of business is making sure you could get it hot.
Yeah.
You weren't using the same space that she was using, though.
No.
Oh, you didn't stay in the space.
No, it had evolved. She had actually moved from there into a gym location where we were teaching, and then the gym had some challenges, and it was a slow shift.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Oh, who's this?
This is Molly Zara.
Molly Zara is a vocal cat. She's been talking to me all weekend long, and she's a big cat compared to my cat. Yeah. Wow. Okay. So, all right. So you carry on with a center of your own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I was able to do that part-time. Mm-hmm. Again, I was just, I don't know, between Jane and I, we were able to just make it work.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to explain, but it wasn't like, I'm not saying that it wasn't a serious business, but we had these students who still wanted to practice yoga, and so they just showed up at the door, and we were able to make it work. And we put in a lot of sweat equity.
Sure.
We were teaching classes without getting paid for a long time.
Right.
But we were just digging it. So
you were impassioned. So was I. I just wanted a place to go to teach.
Exactly. Yeah.
I hear you. And you were just carrying on with this friendly hot yoga style?
Yes.
I like that, friendly hot.
Friendly hot. And,
hot and friendly.
Jane and I went to Albuquerque and did a weekend with Barkin. I don't know if you remember him, but he was kind of like
Who's that?
He was a guy that had, I don't know, been one of Bikram's proteges, maybe. I don't know. Don't quote me on any of this history because the details are sketchy. But anyway, he had developed his own thing, and it was a hot yoga.
Oh, it was like a hybrid.
And so, we were talking to him that weekend because, we had started this studio, and neither one of us were certified. We were like, okay, we got to get certified. What are we going to do? And so he had training going on in Florida, and so we were convinced on, how are we going to figure this out? I don't know, a few months went by, and I had this man show up in one of my classes, and he was very distinct because he had these fabulous tattoos on his calves, and not only that, but when we went into toe stand in the class that I was teaching, he busted into a handstand, and I was like, what the, huh?
That guy, I know that guy, yeah.
That guy.
Toe stand was too easy for him.
And so it was I don't know, the next couple of days or two, I was talking to Kim, and I was like, oh my God, you should have seen this guy who came into class. Blah, 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 blah. And I described him, because of the tattoos. And she goes, oh, that was Sean. Did he ask you if he could teach? And I go, no, he didn't say a word. He was in, he was out, kind of stoic.
Yes.
And just so happened, he came in the day after I talked to her, and so I started, just talking him up in the lobby, and I asked him, I go, oh, Kim said that you come to town sometimes, and you like to teach every now and then, and his face just lit up.
Yeah.
And, he went from this very, stoic face to this lovely, lovely smile. You know how it is. Sometimes people who are not completely comfortable with people that they don't know don't show that other side of them.
And sometimes back then, I was kind of that guy because I was very serious-minded, and I wanted to communicate that about myself in a practice space.
Yeah.
So to have someone then be talk to me on a personal level, which didn't always happen in yoga classes.
Yes.
The teacher didn't always come up and be like, hey, nice
Wasn't
to meet
personable.
you.
Yes.
No, it was always very I don't know, something to prove or something. But then when it gets broken, it's oh, hey, I heard you teach.
Yes.
Then you're yeah, I actually would love to teach, right?
Yeah, so Sean's mom lives here in Las Cruces, and so he used to come to town on a regular basis. And so I scheduled him to teach a class, a special class. And his background was core power.
Okay.
And so Jane and I were the only two that showed up. And it was the slowest, hardest class I've ever taken.
Oh, so it was... Oh, that's interesting, because I have talked to people who've done core power training.
It was insane.
But it's not necessarily like a hot and fast thing.
It wasn't fast.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so afterwards, we were talking to him, and we were like, oh, we've got this problem. We need to get started. Anyway, and he goes, oh, maybe I can help you out. Well, it just so happens his partner, Richard, owned studios in Boston, and they were doing teacher trainings. And because Sean's mom lived here, he was like, I'll develop a teacher training program. You know, he was involved in those programs there already, and he brought that Open Doors teacher training program to Las Cruces.
He did a training for you.
And he did it for 4 years, I think, 4 or 5 years before I took it over. It was perfect. It was absolutely perfect.
So you trained with him, and was it basically like was it like Bikram training, or what
No,
was it?
Not at all.
Was it core power? What was it?
Not at all. It was this interesting hybrid, you know, because we were a hot yoga studio. He respected that. Not that he had any appreciation for hot yoga.
I see. So he didn't care about the hot.
Yeah, not so much. But he also had an understanding and appreciation for a lot of other styles. And so he introduced us to things, you know, of course, vinyasa back then was sort of the deal. So there was
the trend,
big focus in that. Hot yoga, of course, as a matter of fact, I think we hired Kim to do the training portion of that.
And I'm sorry to stop you for a second, but when you say hot yoga, are we talking 26 poses?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And then I don't remember if it was at that very first training. Yeah, I think it was that he introduced us to yin.
Okay.
So here we had this very interesting mix of options for the students there who were taking the teacher training to kind of take the path that they wanted to.
Right on.
How crazy is that?
Well, but no. I mean,
because back then there was a style, you know, typically it was a style. You went to that teacher training
But that is that latter 2007 to 2010 or whatever. Mm-hmm. When I think of that period of time, that's really when things started to have this big shift. It was happening here just like it was happening everywhere, or in a lot of places, not everywhere, because there's still some places that it's...
Which makes sense, because he was coming from Boston, so I'm sure that was prevalent there.
That's, like I said at the beginning, in the cities is where they sort of forefront, or people were hybriding, right? People were combining things.
Right.
They weren't just taking vows and being a disciple of one particular guru even.
Right.
They were studying several. That's how Jivamukti came about, was this hybriding, bringing together of Shivananda, Iyengar, and Ashtanga. But then you even have like core power and yin and all these other things that developed as well. So I think Sean, you said?
Yes,
Sean was
Corneliuson
was doing the same step that a lot of us were doing, which was like expanding your scope of experience. If you are hearing this message, then you're listening to the free version of J. Brown Yoga Talks. To hear the rest of our conversation, please subscribe to Podcast Premium at jbrownyoga.com/premium.